Every April, the British state performs a familiar piece of theatre. It announces a rise in the state pension. The headlines talk about generosity, ministers talk about fairness, and the same message is repeated. You are being protected. But protected from what exactly? Because if you look past the announcement, something else becomes quite clear. This isn't just a pay rise, it's a system. And that system is now sitting on a margin of just £22. This year, the full new state pension rose to £12,548. The tax-free personal allowance is £12,570. This leaves a gap of 22 quid, not 2,000, not even 200, just £22. That is the distance between being outside the tax system and being inside it. And that number matters far more than the headline increase. For years, people have treated the state pension as effectively tax-free, not because it was, but because it sat comfortably below the threshold. That gap is now gone. If the state pension is your only income, you may still sit below that line, but the moment you add anything else, you cross it. A small private pension, some savings interest, a bit of part-time work, that is enough. And once you cross that line, you are in the tax system. What catches people out is how that actually works. The state pension is not taxed before it reaches you. So when your total income goes over the threshold, nothing is quietly adjusted. Instead, the HMRC can send you a bill, often months later. For many retirees, that is the moment the headline stops mattering. Because what looked like a straightforward increase turns into something more complicated. And this brings us to the key point here. This is not an accident, it's how the system now functions. The technical term is fiscal drag, but the mechanism is quite simple. Income rises, the tax threshold stays where it is, and over time, more people are pulled into paying tax. No announcement, no headline, just a gradual shift. This is why focusing on the size of the pension increase on its own is misleading, because what matters is not just what you receive, it is what you keep, and that depends on where you sit relative to that threshold, understandably. Now step back for a moment, because this is not just about 22 quid, it is about direction of travel. The triple law guarantees that pensions rise. At the same time, the personal allowance has been frozen. So you have one number moving and one number standing still. Over time, these two numbers meet. They have to. And when they meet, the outcome changes. And this is happening against a broader backdrop right now. Britain is aging. There are more retirees and fewer workers relative to them. The pension system is not a personal savings account. It is a transfer. Today's workers fund today's pensions. That becomes harder as the balance shifts. So the system adjusts, not in one dramatic move, but in a series of smaller ones. The pension age rises, access is delayed, thresholds are held in place. The headline remains positive. The structure becomes tighter. That is what you are seeing right now, and it helps explain behavior. Why are more retirees working again? Not because they want to, but because the numbers are tighter than expected. And why does property play such a central role in the UK? Because for many people, it acts as a second line of defense, something tangible, something outside the system, because confidence in the system is not absolute. Now, none of this means the state pension is disappearing, but it does mean it is changing. The change is not dramatic though, it is incremental, gradual, and that is precisely why it is easy to miss. Which brings us back to that £22. That number is not important in isolation, but it is important because of what it represents. It tells you how close the pension now sits to the tax system. It tells you how little room there is left, and it tells you how small changes can now have meaningful effects. So instead of focusing on the headline increase, the better question is this in my view. Where does your total income sit relative to the threshold? Because that is what determines the outcome. And that £22 gap is unlikely to remain. If current patterns continue, more people will move into taxable territory, quietly, gradually, incrementally, without much attention. This is how the system works, not through sudden changes, but through steady pressure. So the next time you hear about a record increase in the state pension, don't just look at the number, look at the gap, because in the current system, that gap tells you far more than the headline ever will. If this video has helped you better understand the current pension landscape here in the UK, then please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. All the best.